My sister slid the bread basket toward my son and said, "We didn't order for him." Her tone was casual, as if embarrassment was just another course. My dad laughed. "Should have brought something for him." Their kids enjoyed $100 steaks while mine stared at cold bread. I smiled, said noted, and suddenly every eye was on me. They thought that was the end. It wasn't. What happened after that dinner didn't just shift our family. It revealed what we'd all been pretending not to see. Before I share how it all played out, let me know where you're listening from. So I know I'm not the only one who's had to set boundaries with family. When people ask about my family, I usually say we're complicated. It's easier than explaining the pecking order I grew up with. My parents treated my sister Tessa like she was fragile and me like I was unbreakable. I was the reliable one, the fixer, the one they didn't worry about. Tessa was the delicate one, always in need of protection. As a kid, I'd hear my mom say, "Aubrey's strong. She doesn't need much love." I used to laugh it off, thinking strength was a compliment. But strength comes at a cost. When you finally fall apart, no one believes you can. I'm 35 now, a single mom to a quiet, observant 9-year-old named Ethan. I work as an admin manager at a charter school in Tempe, Arizona. My days are filled with emails, lesson plans, and PTO meetings. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and keeps us safe. My parents still live in Phoenix, in the same house I grew up in. The wallpaper hasn't changed since the 90s, and neither have they. My dad still thinks discipline equals love, and my mom still believes silence keeps the peace. I used to visit every Sunday until the emotional toll became too much. The small talk, the subtle jabs, the comments that left me exhausted for days. Tessa is the golden child, always given another chance. She's bounced from job to job, boyfriend to boyfriend, always starting over. My parents call her brave for trying new things. When I pay her rent or pick up her kids, they call me responsible. Funny how the same action is charity for one and duty for another. So when my parents invited me to their 45th anniversary dinner, I wanted to believe it was a peace offering. My mom's text said, "Just family, nothing fancy." I offered to book the restaurant, a nice steakhouse in Scottsdale with soft lighting and private rooms. I even had their wedding photo from 1978 restored and framed. I hoped, just for one night, we could all sit together and remember we were on the same team. I didn't realize I was stepping right back into the old script, where love had strings and respect had limits. The night of the dinner, Ethan and I arrived 5 minutes early. He wore his little navy blazer, hair combed just the way he liked. He squeezed my hand as we walked through the steakhouse doors. I remember the smell of grilled meat, the low jazz, the clink of silverware. It was warm, expensive, almost too perfect to feel real. Tessa and her family were already there. Her husband, Doug, had a drink in hand. Their boys sprawled across the booth, faces glowing from their tablets. Tessa turned, gave a polite smile, and said, "Oh, hey, you made it." She didn't get up. My mom gave a distracted hug. My dad didn't move. No one noticed the gift bag with the restored photo I'd spent weeks arranging. It sat beside me, forgotten. I helped Ethan with his napkin, pointed at the menu, and whispered, "You can have anything you want." He smiled at the chicken tenders, simple, safe, something a kid would love. I was about to flag down the waiter when Tessa leaned over, pushing the bread basket toward Ethan. "We didn't order for your son," she said. "Mom thought he's picky anyway." For a second, I thought I'd misheard. Then my dad added, "You should have packed him something." It wasn't just what they said, it was how easily they dismissed us, like it was second nature. I looked at my mom. She stared into her water glass, silent. No one else said a word. Ethan's shoulders slumped. He didn't cry, just stared at the bread as if it might vanish if he touched it. Something inside me broke, but quietly, steady, controlled. I realized this table had always been the same. Tessa getting seconds, me cleaning up. I smiled. Just one word, noted. The word seemed to echo. Tessa looked puzzled. My dad went back to his steak, but Ethan glanced at me. In his shy eyes, I saw it. He knew his mom wasn't going to let it slide anymore. I didn't say another word. I just waited for my moment. The waiter returned, notepad ready, smile polite. "Are we all set to order?" The air felt heavier than the lighting. I could hear Ethan's quiet breathing. My dad kept cutting his steak, pretending nothing happened. My mom scrolled her phone. Tessa whispered to Doug, probably about me. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly, silencing the room. Actually, I said, calm and clear. Cancel any orders that haven't gone to the kitchen and put everything that's already started on my father's tab. It's his anniversary after all. You could hear a pin drop. The waiter froze. Tessa's jaw dropped. My dad finally looked up, fork in midair. And for my son, I added, he'll have the ribeye, medium rare, with truffle fries and a Coke. Please make it quick. The waiter nodded and hurried off. Ethan looked at me, unsure if he should smile. I broke a bread stick, handed him half. Eat, honey, I whispered. We're okay. Doug cleared his throat. Was that really necessary? I met his eyes, calm as glass. Yes, it was. No one else spoke. The only sound was the faint clink of silverware from another table. Uncle Frank, my mom's brother, let out a low chuckle from across the room. I hadn't noticed he and Aunt Laura had joined us, sitting at the end. Laura's eyes met mine, proud and knowing. She nodded, like she'd waited years to see me stand up for myself. Dinner dragged on, stiff and silent. Tessa's boys complained about the wait. My dad said nothing. My mom tried to smile through the tension, her voice brittle. When the check came, the waiter handed it straight to my dad. His face turned red, but he didn't argue. As we got up to leave, I pulled the restored wedding photo from the gift bag. It was beautiful, sepia tones, edges smooth, the two of them smiling like the world was just beginning. I set it gently on the table. Happy anniversary, I said softly. Then I took Ethan's hand and walked out. We passed the host stand, the bar, the soft jazz still playing like nothing had happened. Outside, the night air was cold. Ethan squeezed my hand. Mom. Yeah. He looked up, small and serious. You weren't scared. I smiled. No, baby. I was just done. By the time I tucked Ethan in, my phone was already lighting up. Calls from my mom, missed FaceTimes from Tessa, a long voicemail from my dad. I didn't listen. I knew what they'd say. You embarrassed us. You made a scene. You ruined our dinner. For once, I didn't care. I poured a glass of water, sat on the couch, and let the quiet settle. The house felt peaceful, safe. No one talking over me, no one telling me what I should have done. Then my phone buzzed again, a message from Tessa. You owe Dad for the dinner, $1,200. Pay your share. I stared at it, typed back one word, noted, but didn't send it. I didn't need to. The next morning, there was a knock at my door. My parents and Tessa stood on the porch. They never called first. Dad held an envelope. Mom's lips were pressed tight. Tessa's arms were crossed, sunglasses on even though it was cloudy. Can we come in? Mom asked, already stepping inside. I didn't answer, just moved aside. Ethan sat on the couch, pretending to play his Switch. He looked up, caught my eye, then looked away. He didn't need to see this, but he'd lived through enough to know how it went. Dad set the envelope on the counter. That's the bill from last night. You agreed to pay half. You didn't. I leaned against the counter, calm. Actually, I never agreed. I offered to host, and you turned it into a public shaming. That was your tab. You embarrassed the whole family, Mom said, her voice shaking. In public, Aubrey. People were watching. Tessa cut in, sharper. You're delusional. Everyone's talking about it. You looked crazy. I laughed quietly. Crazy? You called my son invisible. Maybe that's what crazy looks like to people who can't handle a mirror. Tessa's mouth opened, but Uncle Frank's truck pulled up before she could speak. I'd called him 15 minutes earlier, said they're here. He'd replied, we're on our way. When he and Aunt Laura walked in, the room shifted. My mom's face fell. Dad's eyes narrowed. Frank nodded at me. You good? Perfect, I said. Laura went straight to the counter, looked at the envelope, then at my parents. You really came here to collect money from your daughter after what happened? This isn't your business, Mom said quickly. Frank crossed his arms. It is when you keep pretending one child matters more than the other. Tessa scoffed. Here we go again, poor perfect Aubrey. I turned to her, voice steady. You know, I've covered your rent for almost a year, paid your electric bill. bought your kids Christmas presents. You never said thank you. You just said you'd pay me back soon. Frank slid a stack of papers across the table. Photocopies of payments and transfers. I hadn't told him I was saving them, but Laura had suggested I keep records months ago. Tessa went pale. You kept records? I keep receipts, I said, for people who forget how much they take. Mom's hand shot up, trembling. Enough. This is private family business. Laura cut in, calm but firm. Then start acting like a family. No one spoke. Even Ethan looked up from the couch. I reached for the envelope, opened it. Inside was the restaurant bill. $1, $200. Neat handwriting at the bottom. Pay your share. Aubrey. I pulled $600 in cash from my wallet. Set it on top. Here's half. Not out of guilt, out of pettiness. I sleep better knowing you didn't get the whole thing. Dad's face flushed. You're being disrespectful. No, I said. I'm being done. I slid the rest of the papers toward them. Proof of every payment I'd made to Tessa. Screenshots of messages. Even a note from the school counselor confirming Ethan was fine after their so-called concern report. Mom's face drained of color. Dad clenched his jaw. Tessa trembled. You're pathetic, she said, voice cracking. Dragging everyone down because you can't stand not being the favorite. I stepped closer. You were always the favorite, Tessa. You just mistook it for love. The room went silent. Frank nodded. That's it. We're done here. I walked to the door, opened it, and waited. It took a few seconds, but eventually they filed out, my dad first, muttering, my mom next, eyes wet, Tessa last, glaring. When the door closed, I locked it and leaned my forehead against the wood. For a moment, I just breathed. Then my phone buzzed again, a voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. This is the Department of Child Services. We received an anonymous report about your son, Ethan. We'd like to schedule a home visit. I froze. By the time the knock came 2 hours later, I'd already cleaned every surface, double-checked the fridge, straightened Ethan's room. The two women at the door were professional, calm. They asked questions, looked around, smiled at Ethan's art on the fridge. One said quietly before leaving, "We can tell this was a misunderstanding. You'd be surprised how often family does this." I wasn't surprised. Not anymore. That night, I gathered everything. Copies of payments, messages, photos, and a letter I'd found months ago in a box in the garage. My mother's handwriting, dated 35 years back. I don't think I'll ever bond with this second child. I'm too tired to try. I read the last line over and over until it blurred. That letter wasn't meant for me, but it explained everything. The next morning, I called my lawyer, Karen, a friend of Laura's. We filed a formal cease and desist against my parents and Tessa for harassment and false reporting. Karen was quick, efficient, and furious on my behalf. A week later, a letter arrived from their attorney. They were filing for grandparent visitation rights, claiming I was keeping Ethan from them out of spite. Karen just smirked. They don't have a case. Arizona law won't back them. But let's make sure they regret even trying. We filed a full response with evidence, proof of harassment, the CPS report marked unfounded, the payment trail, and that old letter from my mother. 3 days later, the case was dismissed. When I told Ethan, he just nodded. So, they can't bother us anymore? No, honey, I said. Not anymore. He smiled, small but real. That evening, as I watched him color at the table, I realized it wasn't revenge I'd achieved. It was rescue. Rescue from a family that confused loyalty with obedience and love with control. After the court dismissed their claim, silence finally settled like fresh air after a storm. No calls, no messages, just quiet. I changed the locks that week and updated my will, naming Uncle Frank and Aunt Laura as Ethan's guardians if anything happened to me. It felt strange, freeing, like cutting a rope that had been digging into my wrist for years. Doug, Tessa's husband, sent a single text 2 days later, a screenshot of a bank transfer, half the rent I'd covered for them. No apology, no words, just numbers. A few minutes later, another message. I'm done with her. Take care of yourself. I stared at it, then deleted it. He wasn't worth the space in my phone. None of them were. A week later, I saw my mother at the grocery store. She looked smaller, older. She didn't speak, just stood by the apples, pretending to compare prices. I walked right past her. For the first time, I didn't stop to make her comfortable. At home, Ethan was on the porch reading. The sunset painted his face in gold and orange. "You seem different," he said quietly. "I am," I told him. I stopped trying to fix things that weren't broken by me. He smiled, leaned against my shoulder, and kept reading. The air was peaceful, and for once, no one else had the power to ruin it. A few weeks later, Ethan and I drove north to Prescott, just the two of us. We set up camp by the lake, roasted marshmallows, and watched the fire crackle against the night. The stars looked endless, untouched by everything we'd left behind. Ethan turned to me, his voice soft. "You seem lighter, Mom." I smiled, watching the flames dance in his eyes. That's what freedom feels like. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I was just free. If you've ever had to draw a line with family to protect your peace, tell me in the comments where you're listening from tonight. Because I know we're not alone.